Shalom, shalom aleichem, anashim tovim uvruchim habaim la'arutz hakatan sheli halayla. Tonight, I want to offer a gift in this season of giving, even though I don't adhere to this world's seasons and holidays, but I adhere to the Moedim and the Chagim that are found in the Torah. I thought it prudent to take the opportunity to offer a true gift, a gift that keeps on giving, if you would, and redeem the time. But before I move forward, I want to take the opportunity to dedicate this video to the memory of a dear friend and brother of mine, Enoch Flores. Enoch Flores passed away recently, and I'm a little scruffy and my sideburns are growing in, having just recently completed the 7 days of mourning for him. Enoch, or Chanok, was a beloved member of the congregation that I attend in Silicon Valley, not far from where I live. And he was, wow. He was a wonderful person. I feel bad for people who did not meet him. He was a lover of Torah. He was a lover of music and of singing, of praise and of worship. He was a family man, married to his wife, Rocio, and he had grown children and two beautiful grandchildren, one just toddling now. And much like Yaakov in the Tanakh, he took those two grandchildren literally as his own, and fittingly so they called him Papa. Chanok was a young man, 45 years old, and he contracted COVID-19, it appears of the worst possible type. He was not a drinker. He was not a smoker. He was an organic type person. And the disease basically just destroyed him. We went to Israel in 2019 on my birthday. We arrived there on October 29th. You can see some of the pictures of him on my of us, and he's included on my Facebook page. And it's just a tremendous loss. We only buried him yesterday, so the feelings are still very raw and upfront. But funerals of the Jewish tradition can be very jarring. But with respect to closure, it does the job. The tradition goes that if you've lived with someone, you loved someone, and they were a member of your community, it's a responsibility of the community to bury the individual. So, you're standing over an opening in the earth with someone that you care about in a box at the bottom and a heap of dirt, and you have to fill that hole, you and all of the community members. So devastating loss, but the Most High will bring healing, and the tears will stop, and joy will return in due time. So until then, or in the meantime, Yehi Zichro Livracha, may his memory be a blessing forever and ever, especially to those of us who knew him and was blessed enough to be a part of his world, and primarily to those who loved him best and loved him most. So I want to talk to you today about possibly one of the most mangled, misunderstood, and abused concepts that you find in the New Testament, in the Brit HaChadashah. What's so funny about it is that you only find this mentioned and or alluded to twice in the entire New Testament. Galatians chapter 6 is where you find it, primarily Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. carry each other's burden. And in doing so, you will fulfill the law of Christ. The law of Christ. What is the law of Christ? What if I tell you, brothers and sisters, that the institution of the law of Christ is a farce built by Christendom? Okay, at its core, it's a concept that has existed for a long time, but that it has been remade and repackaged, and it is a farce, okay, in order to do what? In order to be lawless, in order to separate itself from its Hebraic roots, okay? I'll do what I want to do when I want to do it. So I'll make up crap, even though it's only alluded to twice in a snippet or in a phrase in two different sentences from two different letters. Let's dive in, and I want to offer this to you so that you will understand. So, where do we find the basis, according to Christendom? Where do we find the basis of this thought process? Well, Matthew chapter 22 is where we'll start. Matthew chapter 22, verse 34. Matthew 22, 34. You'll find it there. Okay. And then also you'll find it in Mark chapter 12, I believe. Yes, Mark chapter 12, verse 28. So the first place we're going to go to is Matthew 22, 34. Matthew 22, 34. And of course, I'll be reading from the Hebrew translation of the New Testament. It says, Ka'asher sham'u aprushim ki hishtok et hatzodkim. When the Pharisees saw that he had stumped the tzodkim or the Sadducees, okay, ne'esfu yahdav, they caucused together, okay. If one can't beat them, let's join forces. Wonder Twin powers activate, right? They join forces. Verse 35. ואחד מבעלי התורה שביניהם שאל אותו כדי לנסותו. So one of the masters, Ba'alei HaTorah, don't be triggered by the word Baal, okay, I get it, but this is just how the word was loosely used. Ba'alei HaTorah, master of the Torah, one who was a lawyer, okay, an expert in the Torah, asked Yeshua a question in order to entrap him. Verse 36, Rabbi. Nothing like flattery, right? Before you try to gut punch someone. Rabbi, or my great one, or my master, he says. Ezohi mitzvah hagdola shebatorah. What is the greatest commandment in all of the Torah? All right, what is the greatest? Verse 37, Heshiv lo Yeshua, and Yeshua answered him, ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל שכלך ובכל מאודיך. So he quotes the notorious passage, or the famous passage, from Devarim chapter 6, from Deuteronomy chapter 6, that you should love the Most High Yahuwah, okay, with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your resources, and all of your being. Literally, with all of your all is how it's literally translated. Then in verse 38, he says, Zot ha-mitzvah hagdola ve'harishona. Zot ha-mitzvah hagdola ve'harishona. This is the great and the first commandment. He goes on in verse 39 and says, Hashniya domala. The second one is likened to her, or likened to it. Ve'ahavta lera'ocha kamocha. And you shall love your fellow man and or your neighbor as yourself. Notice this in verse 40. Even though I know you're familiar with it, but think about this. Verse 40, he says, Bishte mitzvot ele tluya kol haTorah ve'kol haneviim. So on these two commandments, tluya, hangs, depends. All of the Torah and the prophets sit on top of these two commandments. And much like the game Jenga, yes, if you pull a piece out toward the top, you can get away. Okay, don't mix linen with wool. That's at the top. Okay, don't have a pork chop. Somewhere toward the middle, in my opinion. But if you pull the first or the second one out from the bottom, the whole thing collapses. Okay, it's the linchpin, for the lack of a better phrase, lynch and hanging. He who has ears, let him hear. Tluya, it's ironic because among some of the most disrespectful people in the modern state of Israel that are religious, that hate Yeshua uh, based on ignorance, history, and horrible people who claim to represent him, he is called in some circles Hatalui, Hatalui, the hung one, the hung one. Okay, so it's kind of ironic that he says on these two commandments. Okay, bishte hamitzvot ha'ele tuluya, hangs all of the law and the prophets. Let's take a look at the second account. Even though it is a mirror account of the same event, it's two different perspectives in what not only what was heard, but what was paid more attention to by two different writers. The other one can be found in Mark chapter 12. Mark chapter 12, starting at verse 28. Okay, it says, אחד הסופרים התקרב ושמע אותם מתווכחים. And one of the sofers, or one of the bookkeepers, drew near, and he heard the argument going on between these parties. And the parties are the Prushim and the Tzodkim, the Pharisees and the Tzodkim, or the Sadducees. Okay? And then notice, it says, Kir otoshi Yeshua heshiv lahem hetev shaloto. When he saw that Yeshua answered them exceptionally, he asked him this question. He says, Ezohi mitzvah harishona mikol. What is the greatest, or what is the first commandment of them all? He says, Ezohi mitzvah harishona mikol. He asks. Okay, in this account, he does not call him a Rabbi or Great One. But again, think about the comparison. These are the things that stood out more to the person who's doing the writing of the individual account. They basically hear the same thing, but it's nice to recognize the nuance. So in verse 29, Ana Yeshua, and Yeshua answered him, Harishonahi Shema Israel Yehuwa Eloheinu Yehuwa Echad. He answers him by quoting, this time, the full part. Okay, the last account, he started at Ve'ahavta et Yehuwa Elohecha b'chol levavcha. But here he starts at Shema Israel Yehuwa Eloheinu Yehuwa Echad. Why? All right, you have to understand that Shema Israel, that verse is not just it's not a capstone. It's not a preamble. It's the command. Okay, Shema in the command form. Okay, there's no stronger form of the word. Shema, that means to hear with the intention of obeying, not just to listen, but to hear with the intention of obeying. Okay, and then he makes the statement, Yehuwa Eloheinu, Yehuwa Echad. He is one, and there's none besides him. This will be brought up a little bit later in this same account. Then he goes on with Ve'ahavta et Yehuwa Elohecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol sichlecha u'v'chol meodecha. The same thing, all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all of your resources, and all of your all. With every fiber in your being, you have to love him. Verse 31, and then he says, Ve'ashniya, he, and the second one it is, Ve'ahavta l'rocha kamocha, love your fellow man as you love yourself. As you love yourself. And he goes on to say, En mitzvah acheret gdola me'ele. There are no commandments greater than these two. Verse 32, the Sofer says to him, Yafeh Rabbi. Yafeh Rabbi. Great it is. Rabbi, you are a great rabbi, or great what you said. Emet amarta she'echad hu ve'ein od milvado. You are perfectly right, Rabbi, when you said that he is one and there's none beside him. Thank you very much, Mr. Bookkeeper, speaking to the Mashiach. Okay? Very good and nice of you to state the obvious, Captain. Obvious. 33, he goes on and he says this, ולאהוב אותו בכל לבבך ובכל בנתך ובכל מאודיך. So he alters it a little bit, right? All that's within you with all of your capability, he kind of offers. Okay, and then he says, ולאהוב לרעך כמוך, to love your fellow man as yourself. He adds this little, he says, הרי זה גדול מכל עולה וזבח. He paraphrases Isaiah by saying, these things are greater than any offering and or sacrifice. That the Most High prefers obedience rather than sacrifice is what he's paraphrasing. So he's in the know, at least from a head knowledge standpoint. So Yeshua, finally, in verse 34, Yeshua, it says, Ra'a Yeshua ki heshiv b'chokhma ve'amar lo. Yeshua sees that he answers wisely, and he says to him, Encha rachok mi malchut hashamayim. You are not very far from the kingdom of heaven, or mi malchut Elohim, from the kingdom of God. He says to him. So, Christendom says that because he summed the Torah up basically with the two greatest commandments. He was asked a question, first of all, what is the greatest commandment? He was asked for one thing. What is the great commandment? So he gave the answer, right? And then he gave a bonus. He gave the second greatest. And he said there's no greater commandments than these. And he also says, bishte mitzvot ha'ele tuluya. On these two things hang all of the Nevi'im, the prophets, ve'et Torah, and also the Torah. So is Christendom right when it comes to the notion that in Yeshua answering a simple question that he somehow shut the book on the entire Torah and reduced it to two commands? No, that's why they're called Christendom. Here, let's dispel a myth, okay? Let's set the straw man on fire and let's warm ourselves in the flames. What if I tell you that the concept of the Torah of Messiah, okay? Mashiach, Christos, right? Same word, law of Christ, versus Torato shel Mashiach, or the law of Messiah, is a very old concept that had already been constructed before the time of Christ in anticipation of the coming prophet that Moshe wrote about. What if I tell you that that concept was alive and under construction during the time of Yeshua and during the time of Paul, also known as Shaul from Tarsus? Philo was a contemporary. Even during this time, he was aware of the law of Messiah and or the law of Christ, if you want to use the Latinized word. And what if I also tell you that that concept continued to be built upon and can be traced effectively to medieval times in the writings of the likes of the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, Nachmanides, the Vilna HaGaon, and a lot of the other writings? What if I tell you that in the Palestinian or the Jerusalem Talmud or in the Babylonian Talmud, you can find a Gemara or a Mishnah within the Talmud, either one of them, that will point to this? What if I tell you that it was classic? It was a classic way of rabbis before Yeshua, during his time, and after him. It was a very typical rabbinic, methodical way of putting the Torah into layman's terms by summing it up by the two greatest commandments. I offer to you today that the quote-unquote law of Christ is the law of Hillel the Elder. The law of Christ is the law of Shammai. The law of Christ is the law of Rambam. The law of Christ is the law of Nachmanides, Vilna Hagaon, and all of these others. Let me show you why. So, first thing that I want to offer to you is this. Hillel the Elder, okay, Hillel Hazaken. Hillel the Elder was, he was at the time, the lifespan of Hillel the Elder and Yeshua crossed at one point. Hillel was at the end of his life, basically, by the time Yeshua was born. But it's rumored that he lived as long as 120 years old, like Moshe. That could just be midrashic, but that's how they have it recorded. That he lived from the year 110 before the Common Era up to the time of 10 of the Common Era. Okay, so 10 AD was around the time that he passed away. What was Hillel Hazaken known for? He was known for his long suffering, okay, and for his patience. You could not flare his anger up for nothing. Men even made bets on what could fire him up. For example, a little self-deprecating humor here, right? If you can't laugh at yourself, then you shouldn't be able to laugh at anyone else. In one of the Gemaras that's found within the Talmud, it says that a guy, in an attempt to make Hillel angry, kept going to the Beit HaMidrash, to the house of, sermons or Midrashim, and he would call Hillel out into the cold. He's like, I'm looking for, and he would say, son, who are you looking for? He's like, I'm seeking for, Hillel the Elder. He says, you're speaking with him? And he would ask him these wide range of really silly questions. One of them was, why is it that Babylonians have oval shaped head? Okay, y'all leave me alone. Leave me be, okay? Look at even the rendering in the back. See the picture there? Had a little, let me, why not? If you can't laugh at yourself, laugh at others. Look at that. Did they nail it? Did they nail it? I think they got me down. Pretty good, right? Pretty good. He asked Hillel the Elder, why is it that Babylonians have oval-shaped heads? He was making an attempt to insult Hillel because Hillel was Babylonian, okay? And he says, well, it's because the Babylonians didn't have skillful midwives. They didn't know how to properly shape the kids' heads, when they came out. Hillel did not bite, so Hillel had dome piece, kind of like me. He's in great company. Trust me. But here's an account, right? Found in Shabbat 31a. Shabbat 31a in the Babylonian Talmud. Now, don't be triggered and stay with me. A lot of people will hear certain names or certain phrases, and because of ignorance, okay, and I say that lovingly, and because of prejudice, they don't want to hear. They would rather remain in that ignorance because of these walls that they've built on bad information. I'm not offering you anything from any of these extra biblical writings as if they are these awesome writings that supersede the Torah. What I'm offering you is a peep into a window, into time, to see how the thought processes of the rabbis, how they thought, how they operated, and to compare them directly to the people within the Brit Chadashah, to understand what the thought processes were. And if something's brand new, and if in fact is fabricated, you'll find out. Okay, so I'm going to read to you, and please bear with me. I had to scribble down these handwritten notes because I had to go online. I didn't want to flip through the tomes that I have here trying to find these things when it's easier to go online, and you can find these things. They're by and large written in Aramaic or Aramaic, but I have to scribble them down in order to find them, and sometimes I guess I should have been a doctor, this handwriting. Anyway, I want to read to you this account. It's a very famous account, and you're going to notice something that's going to make you say, well, really? So it says, Shuv, okay, Shuv b'ma'aseh goy echad sheba lifnei Shammai. Okay, Shammai and Hillel. The two houses of the day was the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel. There were two Pharisaic rabbinical houses that were in direct competition with each other. Shammai was known for being impatient, jerkish, and Hillel was known, as you just found out, for his great savlanut, or his patience or long suffering. שוב במעשה גוי אחד שבא לפני שמיים. There's a story of one non-Judean who came before Shammai, and he said this to him. Amarlo, he said to him, Gaireni, convert me, על מנת שתלמדני התורה כולה כשאני עומד על רגל אחד. Convert me, okay, on the premise that you will teach me the entire Torah while I stand on one leg. While I stand on one leg, okay? Bear with me. It says the Chafu be'amat binyan shebeyado. Shammai took his amat binyan and shoved the guy down and knocked him down, rebuked him and sent him away. So amat binyan is a builder's cubit. It's a big yardstick. It's a measuring stick. It's a modern day, it would be a ruler. Okay, why? Notice some similarities here. Pharisees worked on their own steam. They didn't, by and large, the good ones, didn't rip people off. Paul was a tent maker. Okay. Shammai was a builder. So was Hillel, a builder. Okay. Just like Yeshua was a builder. We keep hearing carpenter, carpenter, carpenter. But you have to understand something. By and large, homes were made out of stone, out of mud, hardened mud, and also stone. All right. If you pay attention to the accounts of the temple being built by Shlomo, they had to send by ship to the Lebanon in order to get Orazim, cedar trees. Trees were never great in abundance in Jerusalem or by and large in Israel proper. Not trees that were good for building. It just wasn't there. You had olive trees, da. In the modern day, you will see a lot of oranim, pine trees, but these are all imports. They are not native to the land. Banana, papaya, all of these things were brought in. But olive trees and zaytun, olive trees, tamarim, date palm trees, those are the ones, of course, that are native to the lands. It's te'anim, the fig trees, and on and on and on. You get the picture. So you had to go a great distance in order to actually get wood from the Lebanon. Okay, so these rabbis, like Hillel and like Shammai, were builders, just like Yeshua, which will also shed light on how someone could take the abuse that Yeshua took on the night before he was executed, and ultimately during his execution. You best believe that he was put together well as a builder using stone. Okay, so he shoves him away with his ruler, his builder's ruler, his amat binyan, and he rebuked him and sent him away. Account of the same man, Sheba lifnei Hillel. Okay, he went before Hillel. He made the same statement, teach me the entire Torah while I stand on one leg. Hillel immediately converts him, okay? And then here's what Hillel says to him. Check this out. He says in Aramaic, Du'alach snei lehavrach la ta'aved. That which is hateful to your friend, not neighbor, that which is hateful to your friend. Chaver in Hebrew, havar in Aramaic. He says that which is hateful to your neighbor, don't do it. He says, Zohi Torah kula, this is the entire Torah. And then notice this last statement. Ve'idach poshahu, the rest is commentary. Zil gemor, go and learn. Zil gemor, go and learn. So that which is hateful to your friend, don't do it. This is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Now go and learn. Now, the first thing you might say is, David, how is this related to our topic? How does this connect? How does this connect? it kind of seems, you might also say, David, that he only addressed one part of it. He only addressed how you deal with your fellow man. Or did he? Or did he? So, first and foremost, deal with the word chaver and why he chose, and why Hillel the Elder chose to use the word chaver. He used the word chaver because the Most High, Yahuwah Hashem, he is called our friend. David was called a friend of the Most High. Quite a few people were called, not a whole lot, but a few people were called the friend. He's also the friend that sticks closer than a brother. Abraham, remember, was a friend. Indeed, he was a friend of the Most High. If you're not familiar with it, there is within the rabbinic world and the process by which a lot of scripture that you and I all agree with today, probably because you didn't know where it came from, is used by this concept because Yeshua used it, but you didn't know it because you're looking at it in English. And it's simply called Mikal Lechomer. I'm lazy, so I'll write script today. Mikal Lechomer. Mikal Lechomer, from light to heavy. Mikal, like kal, binyan kal, the easy form of a word in Hebrew. From light or from easy, lechomer. Chomer is a word that means substance, substance or material, okay? Substance or material. It's also funny that chamor is the word for a donkey. Chamor, okay? A donkey is always represented, and I have to be careful here so this won't turn into a tangent. This will have to be another video. A donkey or a chamor is associated with the substance or material of the world. Miriam, the mother of Yeshua, when she's carrying him, she's riding on a donkey. Yeah, Abraham, when he's ready to sacrifice his one and only son, Yitzhak, he's on a donkey. In Egypt, you remember the rule, breaking the necks of donkeys, on and on. Again, that has to be a different video. I have to run away from that, leave it alone. So the mikal lechomer, from light to heavy, or from light to substance, is the how much more argument that you would find constantly used by Yeshua. Okay, consider the lilies of field. Solomon, dressed in his royal robe, never looked like one of them, right? How much more did he love or care for Shlomo, right? Because no matter how beautiful the flowers or the lilies of the field are, when they wilt, the sun rises and wilts them, right? They're treading down underfoot. Consider the creatures of the air. Ain't got no job, ain't got no income, ain't got no EBT, right? But the Heavenly Father feeds them. How much more does he care for you and I? It is the how much more argument. So he says to Hillel he says to the guy, that which is hateful to your friend, he's also alluding to the Most High, the friend that sticks closer than any brother. He's alluding to him, but he doesn't have to do so in great detail. Why? Because it is an argument from silence that he would include the Most High in his judgment or in what he said to the guy. Okay? It's something that goes without saying. He deals with the guy from the standpoint of, I'm going to tell you what you need to know based on what's in front of you that's tangible, that can be seen, that which is palpable, that which you can deal with and handle. That's your fellow man. Okay, that's your friend. How much more than your friend, okay? But also, I wanted to point out that it is the same argument from silence that is present there with respect to keeping Shabbat. Christendom, okay, makes the claim that when Yeshua has a similar encounter with a young man, and he tells him, if you will have life, keep the commandments. He says, which ones? Yeshua just runs a few off of them. He doesn't have to do the whole thing. He's talking to a Judean who is learned. He doesn't have to run through all of them. Simply because Yeshua does not mention Shabbat, they say, see right there. Just stupid. You can't fix stupid, okay? It is an argument from silence. Why do you say that, David? Well, keep in mind, our ancestors had just come back off of captivity for 70 years for breaking the Shabbat and also breaking the land, Shabbaton. So what was the reaction? It was kind of knee-jerk, sure, but I believe the intention was wholesome. The men of the great assembly, when getting ready to return to Judea, after the decree was given, they built all of this halakha, a lot of fences. And then other people added fences on top of the fences to the point to where on Shabbat you couldn't walk. On Shabbat you couldn't, do this or you couldn't do that. Even up to the modern days, you have some people who won't flip light switches, okay? Some people hungry, lips white. You won't even cook anything. Well, you should have planned better. Guess what? Sometimes things happen, right? And you have to do what you have to do. Even the decree that causes a little bump or a little friction within our community, where people tell you that you can't buy anything, right? Well, they look at, Jeremiah the prophet, shut the gates and don't do X, Y, and Z. He sees the people slipping, and he makes a call and he says, hey, don't buy or sell anything. And he shuts the gate. But what I would offer you is this: you don't find a prohibition against spending in the Torah on Shabbat. You just don't find it. You don't find it. And I'm sure he didn't want the people to slip into madness and into perdition. So preemptively, he says, we're going to shut the gates. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. Is it good for you? Do it. If you don't want to buy anything or spend any money or make anyone work in your mind the way you see it, that's fine. Do you. But don't be dogmatic. Let's not be that way toward each other. You want a sandwich? You want a cup of coffee? Go and get it. You know, everybody can't be as deep as everybody, apparently. So you got to work it out. Fear and trembling. We all have to. We all have a long way to go and a long way to grow. I find out every day how much I do not know. Let's take us home here. Let's take us home here because we already talked about Hillel and how he summed up the Torah. How he simply summed up the Torah. But in summing up the Torah, did he teach his followers afterwards to cancel everything else out? No, he didn't. And neither did Yeshua. Check this out. I'm going to read for you, a couple of snippets from another extant writing, one from the medieval time and one from before the medieval time, right prior to the medieval time, to show you what the thought processes were with respect to our topic. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2 was to carry each other's burdens, and doing so you will fulfill the law of Christ. And then 1 Corinthians 9:21 is the other place where it's kind of alluded to. But again, as I mentioned to you, this concept was alive before the time of Yeshua. Okay, during Paul's time, it was being built upon, and even up until the medieval times, it was continued to be altered and modified. So it's always been there. Okay, and I'm going to prove that to you with a couple of these latter writings. Okay, also I found it a funny note. If you type into the Google search bar "Law of Christ," you'll get a hit from gotquestions.org, which is a Christian think tank. It's nothing of the sort. Anyway, they offer a really, really, really piss poor um, explanation for this. It's pretty terrible. When you don't know anything, it looks great and it sounds great. And this is why people parrot the talking point, because they don't have the research skills or they're just plain lazy, okay? And gullible. Anywho, check that out when you get a chance. So, Torah of the Messiah, or in Hebrew, Torato Shel HaMashiach. Listen to this pre-medieval offering. So it says, and bear with me, please. Torato shel Mashiach HaTorah sheyigale ba'al hitgalut I'm sorry, Hitgalioto V'yilmadota et kol Israel. So the Torah of the Messiah, it is literally the Torah that will be revealed in the time, ba'et, in the time of the Messiah's revealing. Okay, what will be different about it? It says, and he will teach all of Israel. This is why I'm struggling a little bit, you guys, because I had to search this out. I have the Talmud. It's a lot of books, though, and trying to fish through them and find it. It's easier to go online and fish through the Aramaic renderings. But I should have been a doctor. Here's my handwritten notes, and to have to scribble them and try to read them sometimes, it's like a chicken scratch. I should have, yeah. So, um, so it says he will teach all of Israel. Now notice this. It goes on to say that this Torah is the core of the Torah revealed to Moshe, our rabbi. And in it, the deep meanings and secrets of the previously given Torah will be revealed. So the belief that the law of Christ and or the law of Messiah would be not a different Torah, but it would be the deeper revealed and fully made known Torah. Notice what Yeshua said in Matthew chapter 5 when he says, Lo bati levatel et Torah o et nevi'im. I did not come to cancel out the Torah or the prophets, lo levatel aval lekayem, but I came to support it, to sustain it, to make it fully known. Okay, is it starting to come together a little bit? I hope so. How about this from medieval times, from the Rambam? Again, my hood handwritten notes from the Rambam. The Rambam in Judaism and in a rabbinic thought, he's known as Hanesher, Hanesher Hagadol, the great eagle. He's supposed to be like, the great, great, great rabbi. This is how the people of that time frame viewed him. So Nasi, Hillel Hazaken was the Nasi, or the president of the Sanhedrin. So he was in high regard. And then Rambam is considered the highest by the people of medieval time. Please bear with me again, we're almost done. This is what he says. It can be found in Halachot Tshuva Perek Tet. So it can be found in the Halachot of forgiveness or repentance, part 9, Halachot Bet, in section 2. And it says, She'oto HaMelech She'yamod Mizra David Ba'al Chachma Ihyeh Yeter Mishlomo. It says that this great king, speaking of Melech HaMashiach, King Messiah, it says that the King Messiah who will stand and represent the seed of David, it says, Baal Chachma Ihyeh Yeter Mishlomo. He will be much wiser. He will be the master of wisdom, much wiser than Shlomo. Was Yeshua greater than Shlomo? Yes. Yes, he was. Or greater than Solomon is here from his own mouth. Then it says, V'navi gadolhu, and here's where we part ways a little bit, only because he doesn't give Mashiach. Rambam doesn't give Mashiach, who he was still looking for to come. He doesn't give Mashiach the due that he has, because Yeshua is greater than Moshe. But he goes on and says, V'navi gadolhu karov leMoshe Rabbeinu. He will be a great rabbi close to Moshe Rabbeinu. He will be a great rabbi, similar or very close to Moshe, even though in all fairness it does says, Moshe says the prophet you will raise will be just like me, but Yeshua was greater than Moshe. We know this. The Mashiach was greater. And then listen to what he says. Ulefikach yilmad kol ha'am, and in doing so he will teach all of the people of Israel, ve'yoreotam, yore, Torah, more, yore, and he will instruct, ve'yoreotam derech Yehovah, and he will instruct them in the ways of the Most High, ve'yavo'u kol hagoyim leshama'u, and all of the nations will come to hear him. He's echoing the words of the prophet. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah udevar Adonai Yerushalayim, And the word or the Torah will go out from Zion, the word of the Most High from Jerusalem. Okay? And all of the nations will flock to hear him. How does Yeshua fit in? Yeshua was greater than Shlomo, much wiser. Yeshua was greater than Moshe, okay, in that he revealed the heart and the core of the Torah, just as the other reference mentioned. The other reference, don't miss it, says that the Torah, the Torah that the Mashiach will bring, or the law of Messiah, uh, it will be the core of the Torah that was given to Moshe, and in it, the deep meaning and secrets of the previously given Torah will be revealed. If you want to see how Yeshua feels this, read all of Matthew chapter 5. You've heard it said, but I say, right? You've heard it say, don't commit adultery. I'm telling you, don't even look at a woman. Don't swear by the temple. Don't swear by the gold. You don't have the power to switch one hair from dark to gray. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. He laid open the heart and the core of the written Torah given to Moshe. And another aspect as we close that I thought was so beautiful about this is that of the five books of the Torah, Vayikra, or Leviticus is the middle book. Two on one side, two on the other, with Vayikra being in the middle. It is the heart and considered the core of the Torah. And if you look at how beautifully Yeshua summed the Torah up, he took Deuteronomy chapter 6, the Shema Israel and the Ve'ahavta, and he took from the 19th chapter of Leviticus right in the heart of the Torah, and he revealed the heart of the written to make it come alive. And he lived it and he displayed it. So, in closing, brothers and sisters, the law of Christ is a straw man. It is an argument that has been erected and built by people who, again, um, over time, not just the individual people today, but over time, in an attempt to be lawless, in an attempt to separate itself from its Hebraic roots, have built something that can be easily dismantled um, in trying to forge an own identity outside of the original faith. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. The law of Christ, as they're saying, is the law of Hillel, is the law of Shammai, is the law of most medieval rabbis. It's one and the same. The thing that separates all of these other guys, cool as they may have been, okay, even though they did not accept Mashiach, and, it's unfortunate, but it says Yeshua said to the Pharisees of the day, if you do not believe that I am he, you will die in your sins. Um, so the difference between all of these guys and Yeshua is that Yeshua displayed it. He laid the Torah wide open, and he revealed the heart because he knew the hearts of men, and he revealed it as a heart matter, plain and simple. It's not just the letter, okay? It's not just the letter, but it is the spirit of the quote unquote law. For those that have an issue with the concept of Pharisees, right? You always want to give it this negative connotation, but you find that there were a lot of Pushim or Pharisees that did believe in Yeshua and did follow him. They did hold on to some hard-head ways a bit, but they did follow him. Also, make sure you know what you're talking about before you spit vitriol, because keep this in mind. If you lived during the first century, if you believed in miracles, you would caucus with the Pharisees. If you believed in life after death, you would caucus with the Pharisees. If you believed in angels, you would caucus with the Pharisees. And if you believe that in any remote way, in part or in whole, that the will of the Most High could be extracted from reading his word, guess what? You would have caucused with the Pharisees. That's just an offering and something for you to think about. All right, brothers and sisters, again, I hope that this has been edifying with respect to building. I hope it's been informative to you. And if it has been so, please like this video and please also share it with other members of our community. Just 2 cents from the country boy from Palestine, Texas. Until the next time, um, be 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 cautious, everybody. I'm not an advocate of fear, but be cautious. Be cautious out there. Take care of yourselves. Use some common sense. Um, Nobody's family can afford to have anyone taken away. Um, and especially for something as simple as covering your face. Covering your face. If you are not a person that's with vaccinations or what are the other things, I respect everyone's right as an individual to their civil liberties. Um, Double up on vitamin C, double up on B12. Do something, do some things to boost your body and cover your face. You That's about as much as I can say about it. But don't tell me what you're against. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me what you're doing for yourself in order to help yourself and to think about the ones who need you. Um, yeah, be wise. That's all I'm saying. All right, until the next time, be well, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you all really, really soon. Shalom.